All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm your host, TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah podcast. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear me. Some people said they couldn't hear the intro coming on. Let me know that you guys can hear me. Make sure everything's good. So, just want to say Happy New Year's to everyone. And thank you for joining me on the podcast and starting your New Year's off right. It's going to be a good show today. Got a special guest lined up for you all. We're going to get into some good stuff. So, want to say a quick thank you, a huge thank you to everybody who's been supporting my work through Patreon. Rocking with me this whole year, 2018, has been amazing. We've got a lot accomplished, and I'm just so blown away about what we were able to bring to the table, and I wasn't able to do that without your help. So thank you guys, all of you in the chat, everyone listening on your podcast, wherever you are. Any way that you've contributed to this podcast, to me being able to get my music out, the different awakenings and meditations and things like that that we've been able to put out, I was not able to do that without your help. So thank you for helping me finish strong in 2018. 2019 is going to be that much more. So thank you guys for the continued support. There's a new album out, just released at midnight. So January the 1st, my new album Colors is available. If you're on Patreon, you get to download it there, but it's on every other platform as well. So make sure you guys go over there and check that out. Support the show as well. It's 7-song EP. Each song is about one of the 7 chakra energy points in the body, influenced from that chakra. So already getting great feedback, and I just put it up this morning, I guess. So yeah, make sure y'all check that out. And the meditations are doing really well. Getting a lot of good feedback from that. That's a new venture that I just stepped out in, and again, I'm blown away by the support. I'm ready for 2019, and so we're gonna have a lot of new things that we're introducing too. And so be ready, stay tuned, check your emails because you're gonna get a lot of updates out about new stuff that's coming out. I just want to give a quick shout out and update to some of the newest patrons who have joined, and let you guys know that by supporting, you get access to the entire discography. You get access to the Thursday Night School of the Mystics and a bunch of other cool stuff. So shout out to Brandon Wardle. Shout out to you, brother. Thank you for coming on. Taylor Liston, Curtis H., Lisa Jankovic, Mr. B, Brooken Roddenberry, Amanda Marzulli, and Senyo Ocho. Thank you guys for believing in the work and coming on and supporting this thing financially. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on today's guest. This is a really interesting topic. We've covered it before, but it's just a beautiful topic to explore. We're talking about near-death experiences today. My guest is Nancy Rynes. Nancy, welcome to the TruthSeekah podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am awesome today. Thank you for having me on, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Awesome. You have a long list of credentials and going forth and sharing your story on a lot of large platforms. You've been on the NBC Today show, speaking to Megyn Kelly about your experiences. Tons
Yeah.
of places that you've been, and I've watched a little bit, and I've made sure that I didn't just dive all the way into it because I wanted to kind of have my mind blown this morning during conversation. I've listened to your story, and I know a lot about it. Death is something that a lot of people are afraid of. We're getting
Yeah.
older. We have a new year here. Time is very interesting in the way it affects the human body and how we experience it on this side of eternity.
Right.
You were an atheist who had a near-death experience and rocked your world for the better. And
Yeah.
I'm thrilled and ready for you to share your story. So if you want to just kind of give your background a little bit, let people know who you are, what you bring to the table, that'd be an awesome place to start.
Yeah, you're right. I was an atheist before all this happened. In fact, I was raised actually in the Catholic faith. And when I went off to college, way a long, long time ago, I went into the sciences. And in the sciences, it's not really accepted to be anything other than a huge skeptic and materialist and atheist. So that's sort of what became my norm, and that's what I bought into for so many years. But about actually 5 years ago, in just a couple of days, so my 5 year rebirth anniversary is in a few days.
You have the
Uh,
date?
I do. Actually, my
Yeah.
my accident that I'll be talking about was on January 3rd of 2014, so it's coming up here pretty quick.
Heck yeah.
Um, but before all that happened, I didn't believe in anything. I was terrified of death, as so many people are. I mean, it would keep me awake at night thinking about how afraid I was of that final crossing. And I had lost some family and friends before, so I'd seen it happen, and it terrified me even more. And then my accident came. So I was bicycling in my little hometown in near Boulder, Colorado at that time, and just doing my normal errands around town on a bike. And if anybody knows, the Boulder area, everybody does stuff on a bike. It's not unusual that people are out all year round. So I was out on January 3rd. It was a beautiful warm day, and I went into a roundabout, one of those traffic circles, and I was basically T-boned like this from my right side by a woman who was driving a very large SUV, and she was texting while she was driving. I didn't know that, but I just saw, as I was coming into where her road was hitting the traffic circle, I thought she was going to stop, but at the very last minute, it looked like she kind of floored it. So I didn't know what was going on. I was just in that moment focused on trying to survive. And somehow, I mean, she hit me, but somehow I ended up on the hood of her vehicle looking in at her, like, kind of like one of these.
What'd you
And
do?
pardon me?
What'd you do?
Yeah,
No.
what I do, like, hello, I was thinking in my mind, hello, aren't you looking at me? Can't you see me? But she was so focused on her phone that she didn't see me looking back at her. And so she kept driving, and I was absolutely flabbergasted, but I was also terrified. There was that I had this feeling that this could be it. This could be how it all ends for me right here. And she kept driving, and I ended up, because I couldn't find anything to hang on to, I was just in that weird point on the hood of her vehicle I couldn't grab. So I slipped down the front of her vehicle and hit the pavement. And then as she rolled, I was luckily in between her front wheels, luckily. But as she rolled over me, it was something like out of a movie, almost like Indiana Jones. I actually got stuck on the underside of her vehicle. And she was dragging me as she was driving. I'm underneath like this, being dragged underneath the vehicle. And talk about terror. I mean, I was absolutely, absolutely terrified. But one thing did happen, which was the beginning of my sense that all is not as I thought it was in my whole life. So as I hit the pavement, there was a part of my consciousness that remained in my body. It was very animal. I would say I call it the human body consciousness, very focused on survival, fear, terror, that whole, everything that we would think of as far as what an animal might feel in that situation. But then I at the same time, I noticed a part of me was outside of the accident, watching the whole thing, seeing things that I shouldn't have been able to see from under the car. I was watching that whole thing from, I don't know, 50 to 75 feet away as I was being dragged underneath. And it was that part of me that was outside. Some people call it the watcher, some people call it your soul. I don't know what to call it. I just know that part of me was very calm and serene and very connected. I guess you might say, to the greater reality, and knew that this was going to be fine in the end. And there was a kind of a struggle that I had. There was that sense of everything's going to be just fine. It hurts now, but it will be fine. And then that me underneath the vehicle was like, no, this isn't okay. This is horrible. And that sense of what I call dual consciousness, being able to experience two levels of consciousness at the same time, very distinctly. That lasted until the paramedics finally arrived. So what I saw from my outside perspective was that the guy that had been following her he was in another truck, just a bystander, drove around the traffic circle the opposite way to stop her because he had seen what happened. So he blocked her from continuing to drive and effectively saved my life. If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. So he was able to stop the accident from continuing, or stop the crash from going on. And then he called, he and probably a couple other people, from what I understand, called it into the police. Yeah. And, the paramedics arrived fairly quickly after that. And luckily for me, there was a nurse on the scene who happened to be a trauma nurse, or at least she said she was a trauma nurse. And there was a trauma doctor at the scene as well. He was following me in another vehicle, so he was behind me, and he saw the whole thing unfold. And he ended up being my doctor in the ER for the rest of the day. Wow. As well. So he followed me in. But I was so lucky to have all of that support and help right away at the scene. But as the paramedics were working on me and I was feeling the body pain, I had that sense of both aspects of my consciousness coming back together. And I remember laying there on the pavement thinking, what the heck just happened? I didn't use the word heck, but what the heck just happened? What was all that? And I had no concept of what that could be, because first of all, as a scientist, I've been trained your consciousness can't leave your body because it's produced by your brain, right? Yeah. So that whole thing shouldn't have happened, but it did. And that's where the weird stuff from the old me, the weird stuff started. But for me, that's where my life really began to unfold in a beautiful way.
Wow. That's pretty deep. I mean, a lot to say there. So it almost seems like it was going to or was a hit and run.
I think it was going to be a hit and run
if he didn't stop her.
Yeah, once the woman got out of her SUV, what I saw, because I was laying partially out from underneath of her vehicle at that time, and I was just kind of looking at her out of the corner of my eye, and she took one look at me, got back in the car, and started it up like she was going to drive off. Wow. Like with me still underneath.
Just get you out the way and just move on. You got somewhere to be. Got to be at work or something.
Right. Well, yeah. And she, luckily, again, I don't know if it was the doctor that stopped her. I think it was the doc, because the other bystander was actually still on the phone with the paramedics at that point, but someone stopped her from going anywhere. Luckily for me, but it was going to be a hit and run, I believe.
So, okay. You were an atheist. You have this experience. You almost experienced something kind of like bilocation, dual consciousness, which is very interesting. Is that enough to kind of shake your belief? I mean, you have that run-in with death. What happened after that? Was there this place that you went to, this glorious paradise, the land flowing with milk and honey? Did you see angels? Was there any of that took place as well?
Yeah, so that part of it, the bigger, what's really truly termed the near-death experience, happened a couple days later. So this was just enough I was starting to question what I thought was reality. That was all it did. It was like, what in the world was that? That doesn't make any sense. But 3 days later, I ended up having to go into surgery to repair my spine, because my spine was, as you might imagine, busted beyond belief. The fact that I can now still walk is utterly amazing. My neck was broken in multiple places. My lower back was a mess. It was broken in multiple places. So really, I shouldn't have survived the accident. But so I was scheduled to go in for surgery on the following Monday. So this was a Friday. I went in on Monday. And I had what no one can really explain was a bad reaction to the anesthesia. And which is weird because I'd had this anesthesia many times before when I've had, regular surgeries. I've had a few other surgeries before and never had a reaction at all. But this time my heart stopped, my breathing stopped, my blood pressure went basically flatlined for somewhere between a minute and 2 minutes, which in the OR is a real long time. They don't like that happening.
Yeah.
But it's a long time. And what I experienced, though, I didn't know any of that. All I experienced was drifting off, into unconsciousness because of the anesthesia. And then I woke up, which you're not supposed to do. And I woke up standing up, which again, I looked down and like, this isn't supposed to be happening. I was standing up on a hillside. And while it wasn't necessarily the land of milk and honey, it was definitely a different realm or a different part of reality, or a bigger part of reality. And it wasn't really the visuals that were astounding to me. While they were, there was the energy, the colors, the sense of depth to everything around me. It wasn't just a tree that was in front of me. It was tree with many layers of energy, like coursing underneath of it. That wasn't the kicker. The kicker for me was feeling coming through me, like through my body, waves of love. It's the only term that I can come up with. Waves of love and acceptance and joy and peace and a welcoming.
Yeah.
And that is what really woke me up. And I looked around. I remember distinctly looking around like, this isn't a bad place to be during surgery, because I was actually thinking that I was hallucinating at that point. Even though you're not really supposed to be able to hallucinate while you're under anesthetic. I was thinking that it was a hallucination. But then I began to wonder if I died on the operating table, because I knew that this level of awareness shouldn't happen under anesthesia. And I thought, well, I must have died, because that's the only thing in my mind that could explain this. But then I thought, well, if I died, why am I here? Because I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe in anything after death, that death is it. And that's when there was it wasn't really a voice. I call it a voice, but it was a voice that kind of came from everywhere through me. It wasn't really an audible voice necessarily. But this voice said, this is your home. Welcome back home. You are a part of me. You're a part of us. Welcome home. And that's when I just wept, because I remembered just in that instant that was our soul's reality, if you will. And this physical is but a temporary state of being. And that's when things began to shift, is when I remembered what my true home was. That's where things really opened up for me. And where I was really challenged beyond, I still am to this day, but that's where the challenge began, the challenge to really embrace that here in this plane. That was my life's challenge, is to take that, all that I learned in the time after that voice welcomed me. I was there for what seemed like months, but I knew that the challenge would be to take that and come here with it.
That's always the hard part. A lot of that stuff is slippery. You're hanging on. You're trying to explain to people what colors sound like,
right?
And what sound looks like, and the feeling. And it's very similar the way you're sharing that story. Like, we've had we did a men's retreat, and we did a pretty high level dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and felt like we had that. We went to the place you go when you die, and the funny thing is, it sounds exactly like what you're talking about. This ancient place of the ancestors are like, hey, this is where you're coming. We're here. We love you, and and you feel love, and
Yeah.
like you're talking about the sound, and there's a thing to kind of like know you're loved, whether it's loved by God or loved by your family. You know it, but to tangibly be able to
To
feel
feel it.
love wash over you, like physically, euphorically wash over you
Right.
and clean you out. That is, it's hard to explain that. And there's this like, I've had that encounter. Then I've had other people who've had near death experiences on here. There's these Bible scriptures like Apostle Paul, like leaving his body and traveling to the third
Right.
heaven, and he comes back and he says, "I've seen things that it's not permissible for me to say. Like even if I wanted to communicate, I heard the voice of angels. They have their own language. There's no way I can physically. I would sound like a madman. I'm gonna do my
Right.
best, but there's no way to kind of articulate the beauties and wonders that I've seen. And just to start to take a piece of it and share that and to bring it back and try to embody that truth of, hey, this is temporary. Where you're going is a beautiful place, and it's where we all came from. And that information that comes from that realm is so beautiful. You talk about having this inward knowing, this quickening. It even
Right.
calls it a
Yeah.
quickening in the Bible, this inner still small voice or whatever, guiding you. He said they spoke as we. This is, we're here with
Exactly.
you. Did you see any beings? There's people in the chat want to know. People follow these stories of these near death experiences. And most people say there's a man who approaches them. Is it Jesus? Is it the Christ? Does he may not even say his name? Did you have that kind of encounter at all of someone who's like, I'm the one who shows you around or anything like that? Was that
I
kind of
did.
going
I
on?
did. And she, I call her she, but I also know that that was a cloak that she wore just for the time that she was with me. In fact, she said that, but I'll call her she. And later she explained that I could use the name Mary, although she said uh, don't put too much on that name. It's just a name that many have worn, and it's just as good as any, is how she put it. So it's just a name, which is why I often don't use it. People put too much
Yeah, what's
content
his name?
around that.
If you don't
Right,
get the name right, then
right.
yeah,
But
doctrine and
but
things.
but this, when she approached me, she looked like a silvery spiritual. I mean, all I can say is she looked like a silvery spiritual being that was vaguely in a human, like womanly form, with what appeared to be long hair. And she glowed. I mean, it was like this silvery glow that was coming off of her, and her garments, or her energy around her, looked like, cloaks. But I knew, and she explained to me that that was really just a form that she took in order for me not to get freaked out, because
Yeah.
I need, as a human, I'm still partially in
Mm.
that human phase. Because what I've learned since, and during that time, is that when you first take the first steps in leaving this body, you're
Mm-hmm.
still pretty well attached to it. There's a process of letting go of that attachment to the physical human self. And I was still pretty fairly attached to that physical human self. So there was still the potential to have fears come up. And she and they, all of them, did everything they could to keep me from freaking out. So that meant the guide that came to me would be one that wouldn't be intimidating. I think if Christ would have shown up, or Buddha, or some, bigwig would have shown up, I would have totally freaked out.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't my reality up to that point. I needed somebody that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like me, that I could relate to. So what I saw was a woman who had an incredible connection to a group of beings beyond her, which were kind of like phased out of my sight. I knew that they were there with me. I could feel them. I could feel their thoughts occasionally. I could, like in here,
Yeah.
not in here, not by my
Yeah.
ears, but in here. I could feel their emotions. I knew what they were feeling, but I couldn't communicate directly with them because, as they said, there are too many of us and only one of you, and you can't handle the amount of information that we could give to you all at once. So it was being filtered through this woman, this womanly guide of mine. And she acted as kind of the intermediary for this whole time that I was there. And effectively what it was a training session or a retraining session. And she was teaching me what I needed to take back to this life in order to make this life one that would be worthwhile for me and my family and my friends. So basically to be the love that I wish to see in the world, to learn how to really do that, to be present with that higher truth in this life, so I could just be an example of what that looks like. It isn't so much about telling people, it's also about being an example. And so the next, what seemed like a couple of months, I mean, there wasn't really a passage of time, because time is meaningless, as you know, in that realm. There isn't a sense of that. But if I was to learn those same things here in the same way, it would take 2 or 3 months here. So she taught me, some of the grander concepts of love and gratitude and connection, and how your thoughts and feelings and choices truly affect the world around you, not just the physical world, but also spiritually, how those spiritual vibes, if you will, go out. How everything that you do, every way that you show up in your life makes a difference. And it was all of those things together that really began the process of shifting. It's taken many years after that to kind of fully bring it into my life, but that's when it began to really truly unfold for me. But to have that support, now those 1,000 or so other beings, I knew were, you could call them a soul family, you could call them soul friends. I like to term them my friends, because they tend to be my, I call them my spiritual friends, but they're as everybody has, a group of like-minded or like-hearted spiritual beings that tend to support each other. And they were mine. You'll have yours, everybody has them, but they were mine, and they were there to support me and be with me during this time of my learning.
Let me ask you this about the woman,
Yeah,
and just about the place in general, because you're talking about she assumed a form that wouldn't freak you out, something
right.
you can handle. Now, we've heard a lot of stuff about that, where the Jesus figure or the ETs or whoever, they're able to kind of take forms that you're going to accept, that's not going to freak you out or scare you. I want to ask you this. In that realm that you were in, you've seen hills, mountains, beautiful trees. It looked like earth, something you were used to, something, a place where you wouldn't freak out. Hey, this is what she knows. She loves trees, energy.
Right.
Let's show her this. Is there a chance that materialized for you to feel safe, and that's really not what it looked like? And I say that because my experience on that side was a lot of moving colors, was a lot of geometric patterns, there was no way to explain. Everything was moving. Everything was moving. Do you have you have you explored that thought at all? That they brought you to a simulation room or this place? Hey, okay, this is where we can meet with her. Let's give her a beautiful place.
Yeah. That's a good point,
that won't
because
freak her out.
you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. At one point, as we were what I call walking, we weren't really walking, we were kind of gliding. I looked behind me, because the scientist brain was thinking just that, like, what is this? How come it's exactly like I think it should look like, right? And I looked behind me, and it was fading away into a gray mist. There was nothing behind me. And when I looked at her, I asked her about that, and she said, we have constructed this place for you.
Wow.
We've basically gone into who you are as a human, and like you said, pulled out that which would feel comfortable for you. We have you meaning, so she was talking about me. She said, you and we have created this place together for you as a transition. It is and as you describe, I call it the green room, but it's a transition place where you basically get what you need to be in. You get to see or experience that which you need to experience in order to move on, whether that's moving on to full death, final death, or in my case, a learning experience, then to be able to come back. But in that in between the physical vibration and the full on spiritual vibration, we do have what we experience is really drawn upon from us and what it is that we need, and to some extent what our spiritual team or what the divine thinks that we need in order to move on. So yes, it really was what I see. That's why it's why when I talk about this to groups, and even in the book that I've written, I don't really go into the visuals all that much. I go into some of the basics, like how you can see emotions come through the colors that are in the plants, right? And your emotional state will affect the energy of the world around you. But I kept stressing to folks, and I still do, that what I physically, or what I think looks physically around, like a landscape around me, may be different for you. You might be at the beach, you might be on a planet in some other star system. I don't know. And so that's why I don't really go into like the tour guide aspect of what I experience, because it will be different for each person. That piece of it, the outward piece of it will be different.
How long were you pronounced dead for? I know it was just a few minutes, but felt like consciously an eternity. I mean, how long were you over there for in the physical realm?
Well, it depends on how my doctor describes it to me. So physically, I was out for about a minute and a half. That's the flatline piece of it. Now, when he and I talked about this later, and he does not discount this, by the way, so he's one of the few docs that will come out and say these events are real. They point to a greater reality than just this. But he said, that in his experience, those physical those physical crises can just begin the NDE, and the NDE itself can last for like the entire surgery. So he doesn't really know. He said it was at least a minute and a half, but that it could have been for me that I was, off in the spirit realm for up to 2 hours, because that's the length of the surgery. Um, I don't know. I don't really know. But I do know that to me, like it said, it felt like a couple of months
Because
worth
there's no
of,
time.
right.
Yeah.
There isn't. And that's the hard thing one of the hard things to explain to people is like that time dichotomy. We experience an arrow of time, as it's called, but there everything is all at once. Everything is now.
Whenever you came back, you talked about this this information that you received and just deep inner universal truths about God, about life, about yourself, about energy. You take that with you, you try to articulate it. There's much more that was shown to you, but it's slippery, and it's just how the human mind works. We kind of know it, we forget details. It just because there's just so much. You're talking
Right.
about, like I said, almost like another lifetime within a 2 minute window, maybe, or whatever the case
Right.
was. So you kind of lose a lot of that stuff coming through, but you hold on to what you can to try to articulate it, to remember to write it down. Are you able to communicate now with the angelic figure that approached you, with the guides? Did they tell you, hey, when you need us, we're here, just tap in, come to the place where there is no time, in between
Right.
the thoughts? That's our walkie talkie. Come
Right.
here, we'll meet with you. Are you able to do that and actually go back and access that information again? Do you practice that in at all or?
I do. It's a, it took me a process of over maybe 18 months to learn how to do that from here, because it's a shift. It's really learning how to shift your energy up enough that those entities, the celestials or angelics, can come down and you meet in that level where both can communicate. For us, it's tough for a lot of people to get their energy up to a place where they can hear that. Oftentimes, everybody actually has access to that divine voice in their heart, and that's where going into the quiet, to whether you call it meditation, I call it prayer. Some people go out into nature and commune with nature, but getting into that quiet voice in your heart is an easy way to get there. But if for me to get to a similar level as I was during my NDE, which almost every near-death experiencer wants to get back to experience that level here in the physical. I've learned how to do it through a combination of contemplative practices and raising up my energy level. But it's very, for me, it's a very deliberate and
Yeah.
intentional process. I can, when I get myself into a pickle, sometimes that guidance will come right through, whether I've done the work to get up to that level or not. And my spiritual guide will be right there with me. But for the most part, I have to be very intentional about making that shift up in energy or consciousness to get to that, hear that guidance.
Um, you growing up Catholic, I don't know what it was that uh swayed you away from the faith or made you become an atheist. If you really believed at all, even growing up Catholic, there's always a sense of you're running from the very thing that you need. You're Paul,
Right.
Paul, why are you persecuting me? I created you, but you're telling people I don't exist, or you're an atheist, you don't believe. Well, there's the scientific mind that just kind of battles faith at times like that. Um, Coming from that background, Catholicism, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I really see the Catholic faith really venerates Mother Mary, sometimes maybe even over Christ, where
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying, we pray to Mary, we ask her to do, to pray on our behalf and things like that. So it's very oriented around the woman. Do you think that that is one of the reasons that the woman showed up to you rather than the Christ figure? Was it that Mary was that safe motherly being that's been there and you kind of had that marriage back with maybe the thing you were running from? That Mary was the personification of grace, of the motherly aspect of the faith? Do you think that that had to come into play at all?
I think it may have been the nurturing aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
the motherly aspect. Again, the figure that showed up to me said not to place too much emphasis on, the name, because
Who
it
it
wasn't
was?
who she was.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that it was a gentle, loving, motherly figure
Mm-hmm.
probably harkened back to that. But
Yeah.
there's also another potential aspect to that, in that, my childhood wasn't necessarily the best.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time also, I needed a motherly figure.
Wow.
And so there's probably a lot of reasons why that being chose to show up
Mm-hmm.
as a female.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that she explained it to me, and I hate to use the pronoun she, because she really wasn't a she at her
Mm-hmm.
core. Um, she was non-gender specific. It was an technically in our language, it was an it. But the cloak that was brought to me was one that would be comforting, and that would
Yeah.
be, someone that could nurture, that could be gentle yet strong, and maybe that's where, the whole motherly figure came in, was that was what felt
Yeah.
natural to me. Now, as a kid, I always felt like I wasn't good enough for Jesus. I never felt good enough
Mm-hmm.
for Jesus because he is, and at least in my church, he was, this perfect being that, you couldn't be
Yeah.
imperfect around him, right?
It,
That was the way he was presented to
yeah.
me. That's not how,
You
he
view it
is,
now.
but
Yeah.
but that's how I viewed it as a kid. That's
Yeah.
what I took away
That's
from the faith,
interesting. Yeah.
was that I had to be perfect and there was no room for imperfection.
I
Well,
wonder if that's why, and I'm just putting two and two together. I wonder if that's why there's a lot of personification of the saints to, hey, ask this saint to pray on my behalf because I'm not really worthy to go directly to him. But this saint who has lived a perfect life or a great life, they're more worthy. I wonder if that is kind of how that goes on a little bit in the faith.
it could
It
be,
seems like it.
a lot of Catholics or lapsed Catholics that I've spoken with, have that insecurity
Yeah.
about Jesus, about Christ. They don't. In fact, my dad, when he was a Catholic up until the day he died, and didn't feel worthy of Jesus the day he died.
Mm,
And this was a man who had been a believer his entire life, 70
yeah.
some odd years, but he didn't feel good enough. So there's this, I don't know if it's every Catholic, but certainly within some of
Yeah.
the Catholic folks out there, there's this not good enough. We don't feel good enough to be associated with Jesus, so we need to find something else that's kind of that
That's very
intermediary.
interesting. Yeah, I've never even looked at it like that, but that is very interesting.
Yeah.
Let me
But we
ask you.
are. I mean, we are all, I just want to put it
Okay.
out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We are all good
Definitely.
enough. Imperfections are normal and accepted and part of the whole process of being human, and it's fully understood that we are imperfect beings, that we're loved, and in fact, we are beloved because of it. So I don't want anybody to go away with this thought that because we're all imperfect, that we're
Yeah,
not worthy.
not
That's
worthy.
totally not the case. I've learned my lesson there.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I want to ask you this because this is something I've explored and talked about openly on many podcasts, and I've actually said I would like to speak to someone who's been on this similar aspect. There's this, we talk to a lot of spiritualists, a lot of New Agers, a lot of Christians or whatever. Um, to me, it's just natural for God to be the Father. I call him, when in my prayer life, it's Father God. I talk about Mother God too, but that is more of the earth energy for me. This Father God, and how when I came to faith, it was very much so that I had a mother growing up. I didn't have a father. I needed that
Right.
masculinity. I needed that father figure to hug me, to love me, to affirm me, to teach me things that a father never taught me. So I can be objective about my belief and know why I needed that father. And quite literally, I feel like God showed up as a father in my life, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I wondered, what about the person who didn't have the mother? Does God show up to be the mother for that person? And it sounds like that's somewhat like what you've encountered a little bit. So
Right.
would you say that that happens? Like what? Like there's all of these names for God, even in the Bible. There's,
Right.
I'll be your provider, I'll be your protector, I'll be your strong tower, and there's different literal names for each attribute of God, God the Father. Um, so does God show up? Because He shows up as what you need. If you don't need it,
Right.
why would it even be there? But if you
Right.
need the mother figure, does God show up and nurture you, and or send forth the angels who are the nurturing spirits, or the Holy Spirit, which is more of a motherly figure? Does that is that kind of how you interpret it a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. We're like I said before, we're given exactly that which we need, not just during an experience like an NDE, but here and now
Mm-hmm.
too. In this place, there is no separation. That's one of the key things that I learned is there isn't a we invent this separation between the physical and the non-physical. It's just a gradual shift. There's not like a wall that you have to jump over in order to get, into the spiritual realm. It's a shift in consciousness and a shift in energy that's on a continuum, really. but yes, we can experience, at least in my view, we experience the divine in whatever way we need in that moment. For me now, it shifts a lot. I tend to experience that divine presence um, as it's been, as I heard it over there called the one who is the all, or the one. And so that's how I experience it, as kind of a non-gender specific, one love, one universal love, one universal knowledge. But certainly at times when, so I had another NDE last year, very brief, but in that time, that divine voice was very masculine. I mean, it was very definitely the same voice, but it came in with like a more masculine aspect. And so during that brief experience, I think what I needed was kind of like all right, a firm father figure to say, you got to make a choice here, kiddo. This is do or die, literally. And I needed that firm kind of father-like voice to make that decision. In that time, it was to come back here. So I had another experience about a year ago where I was in the hospital with pneumonia and waited too long to go into the hospital, and effectively died in the ER because my lungs were filled up. And as I floated out of my body, that voice came through very masculine and said, you have a choice right now. Your choice, stay or go. Which will it be? And it was very strong and very definite. And I made the choice and came right back in. So yes, we can, from my perspective, we can experience it in any form that we need. And that's the beauty of it, right? We're loved so much. We are loved so much that it's hard to put it into words, but we're supported in whatever way that works best. Sometimes it might not be easy. Sometimes we might need a little bit of a boost or a jolt to get us out of our comfort zone. But we, in the end, do get exactly what we need in order to make that shift.
Now, what about the concept of hell? Did you have any revelation of that? Because maybe that's one of the big fears of people think that they're gonna burn forever. It's overcoming, and that's if we're talking about faith, if we're talking about Christ or whatever. Like, one of the big things is conquering death and taking away the sting of death and the fear of death. And one of the biggest fears is either being punished for all eternity because you don't add up, or being annihilated, just not existing anymore, and not being able to be conscious anymore. Did you explore that aspect at all?
I didn't directly. What was explained to me is that we can certainly create a hell for ourselves here on earth pretty easily. So that's one aspect of it. There's another aspect of it, though, that when we first cross over, during the true death of the body, not mine, where everybody knew that I was coming back here except me. All of my spiritual friends knew I was coming back. So that it's a little bit different when you're truly dying, when your physical body is truly dying. There is a moment, as my spiritual guides have told me, where you have a choice. You can choose to go to the light or turn away from it. And it's that turning away that is, in my estimation, may be the hell that a lot of people are afraid of. But the turning away is only for as long as you wish to turn away. You are accepted back as soon as you embrace that divine love, the divine presence, the divine light. There is no, I hate you for all eternity, at least as far as I can see. As soon as you make the choice in here to embrace that divine love, the divine being, God, you're accepted back in. Now, that doesn't mean everybody takes this the wrong way at first. It doesn't mean that you're without consequence for your actions. So you may have to make amends, and likely you will have to make amends for if you've done something really horrible. Probably not many people out there, but say, for example, you have done something pretty heinous. or you think in your mind that it's pretty heinous, you do have to make amends for that. That doesn't mean you burn in hell for all eternity. It might mean you have to, in some way, act as a spiritual guide for someone else. You might, who knows what that looks like for you, but you do have to, in some way, make up for that, or try to make things right, or pay back in some way. So it isn't without consequence. Your actions are not without consequence, but you are loved. God does not deny his love from you. We often deny our love from God for a while, like I did. You turn away for a while, but guess what? We're accepted back in when we embrace it.
What about this notion of past lives? Was there a notion that you can come back even as a different person? Are you ready to reincarnate as something or someone else? Is that even a thing of past lives? Was there any information like that came through or comes through?
What I did ask about that. It is a thing for some people, and it's certainly a choice that's available. And what I was told was that a lot of beings choose not to have a second time around. Some do. It depends on that individual soul and their connection to the divine, to God, what would work best for that person. So it isn't, from what I saw anyway, it isn't mandated, like you must return and do this and that. It's more like, is this going to be helpful for you? But there are a whole lot of other ways, to do work, or to live in that divine love. You don't have to necessarily be back here in this physical plane. I've spoken with a woman who remembers several past lives intimately, and also when she acted as a spiritual guide for someone else. So the individual soul has many, many, many options available to it, in the spiritual realm. It isn't just physical life. There's a lot out there that we don't know about, and an incredible amount of diversity, in what we can do and be.
Sometimes our mind can't handle all of that diversity because we have to have it. Okay, what is it? It's this, it's that, and this. Okay, that's it. Everything else is not God or not possible because it hasn't been revealed to them. They haven't been to those states or realms of consciousness by whatever state. I mean, you can get to very similar states through certain meditation practices, as you have learned. Like if you want, I mean, for me, it was always if you want to continue communication, if you want to go further, do this. And we can do it. We can go further. And so it's the ball is in your court type deal. But it's always there. You're not alone. That's a big one too, right? Being an atheist, I mean, I'm sure that idea is a very lonely road, as one that, when you're alone, you're alone. That was one thing that changed for me when I came to faith, was the fact that I was always depressed and by myself and loathing and stuff as a teenager. But then when I came to faith, I was never alone again. By myself in a room, I was always connected with God, with the angels, with Jesus, right? The Holy Spirit. I was never by myself ever again. So there was never this, if I felt lonely, I start fellowshipping with my father, with my brother, Jesus, exactly. This type of stuff. So was that something that came to you as well, from being an atheist to now being a person of faith?
Yeah, that it is a lonely road because, like, as you said, when you are alone, that's it. You're sitting here in your house all by yourself, and wow, this is all there is to life. But when I came back here and came into my full faith again, and I say again for a specific reason, but when I came back, I understood what they had told me when I was dead. And like you said, you can come to this understanding in a lot of different ways. There are many, many paths to God. It's not just the NDE or, meditation or whatever. So this is just one pathway to greater understanding. But one of the things that my friends, my spiritual friends, my spiritual team told me is we're here for you 100% of the time. All you need to do is call on us. We're here with you. And what they also said is don't forget about us because we like hearing from you.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I'm not in that state where I've raised where I've intentionally raised my vibration up or whatever, raised my consciousness to be able to have a real full on communication with them, I know they're here. I still greet them. I talk to God all the time. People might think other people, atheists might think I'm nuts, but I know that it's heard. I know that I'm part of the communication all the time. And it is a very comforting thing probably one of the more comforting things that I've experienced going through this is knowing that my deceased family and also my spiritual friends are able to tap into me at any time, and I can communicate with them whenever I want. That I'm not alone, that they're here with me all the time. There is, like I said, there is no separation. You don't have to walk through 10 doors, to be able to hear your spiritual guides. They're right here all the time.
You're quite the artist as well. You've got a lot of beautiful art on your website and things. Have you um, tried to bring that back through the art? Is there I mean, I'm sure it's in a little bit of all of it. It's just that expression with this new life that you have. But have you tried to draw the angelic figure, the woman? Tried to embody that to show people what it looked like or anything like that?
I have, and it's in my estimation kind of been a failure because it's really hard for me to put into paint that which is ethereal and spiritual. I have tried, and the best I can do is what I've been doing now with the art is to bring in um, different kinds of paints. So I bring in mineral, like actual
Yeah.
gemstone paints that have a really high
Vibration.
energy.
Yeah.
And I also use paints that are sparkly. I know it sounds kind of like, I don't know, like a little girl or something, but that's kind of how I paint now. I paint with these really sparkly, glowing paints so that at least I bring in aspects of that energy into my paint. And my paint technique is different these days. But what I came back with wasn't really so much a desire to paint that which I experienced while dead. It was a desire to highlight the divine here in this physical, because there is divine all around us. We just
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes turn a blind eye to it. So there's a painting on my website on my art website of a little girl with Down syndrome, and she's in this glowing golden background, and I used a lot of gold paint and sparkly paint in that. But that came as a result of somebody on social media saying that people with disabilities were ugly, and I said no, that's not true. There's divine in everyone. And so that was when I began to set out to highlight the divinity in everything, even if it's a dog, or a horse
Yeah.
or a person. There's divinity in the plants. And that's what my goal has been, is to really highlight that energy and divinity in all around us here in this plane.
It's very interesting. How do you feel after creating now? There's this weird sensation that I get of when no matter what it is, right? If we hear the scriptures that say that we're made in the image of God, who is a creator himself, right? And so we're these little creators.
You're right.
Once you bring something to life, I mean, you have the book, we have this interview that didn't exist until we put our minds together and we did this interview, had this beautiful conversation, or we're having this conversation. Your artwork, it didn't exist until you maybe went into the ether, went into your mind, or seen the beauty of a plant. That's just something that's just ordinary, and you brought it to
Right.
life and you embodied it, and now it exists here. is there this appreciation of I'm a little creator that it didn't exist? I have this really beautiful feeling when I create stuff, and I know that I'm
Yeah.
contributing something beautiful to the world as a creator. Do you feel that as well? That connection with your art and stuff?
I do, and it isn't for me only the end product. I don't know about for you, but when I am actually in the act of creating, I don't even feel me anymore. For me, on most days that I go to the easel, it is as if I'm in an all-day meditation where I don't exist. It's just I'm just there as a way for the brush to make its mark known on the canvas. And there is that energy of creation kind of coming through me almost without my input. Now, granted, there is some of me, physically, but there is a when I'm in the act of creation, it's almost like a oneness with the creation itself, with the bigger creation. But then, when it's all done, there is that satisfaction of wow, like you said, this didn't exist before, but now I can also help. I'm a visual artist, so for me, help people see
Mm-hmm.
the beauty in a different way in the world around them, because they might not see a dog sitting on the back of a pickup truck is all that beautiful when they're out, driving around. But when an artist paints it and does certain things with it, that viewer can take a step back and go, "Wow, I can appreciate that now in a different way." So that really gives me satisfaction that people, maybe because of something they see of mine, appreciate the world around them a little bit more. I mean, I certainly do. Whenever I look at anything now, it's just beauty. That's all I see is beauty. It doesn't matter what I look
Yeah,
at. It's
that's
all
good.
divine beauty.
See God in
So
all.
exactly. Exactly. That's what it's all about for me is so whether I write a book or not, or for me, it's mostly paint. That's how I express that beauty that comes through me. And it, to me, it's a blessing, and it's an absolute divine blessing that I have that capability to do that.
What did you do before the first accident? What did you do for a living?
I was a science writer. I wrote scientific and technical stuff for various companies in the Boulder area. Mostly doing satellite type exploration. And so, we get a satellite, and the satellite would look at the Earth and look for different minerals and stuff. And I was the technical writer, science writer for those folks.
So
Um,
it changed the a little bit. You're still writing. You still
I still write.
yeah.
It,
So
it it changed the trajectory of what I wanted to write about. In fact, my brain doesn't really work as efficiently in that way anymore. And who knows why, but it doesn't. I, I I love the scientific method. It's a really great rational way to look at things, but it isn't the only way. And there is more to life than just science. There's more to this universe than just a scientific viewpoint. And I think that's what shifted for me was just the knowing that there's a lot more out there than what I learned about at university.
yeah.
And it's much grander and more amazing that I could have ever learned about in graduate school.
There's this idea that I've been kind of exploring a little bit, whether we're talking about psychedelics or maybe any type of near death experience. This place where you go, where you see eternity. You see
Yeah.
what you get a better picture of even this life and what matters, the stuff that I'm seeking, the stuff that I've been working my whole life to obtain. It doesn't matter. What matters is peace, love, joy, family, making memories, helping people. Like those are the things that you kind of bring back from that realm. And people have come back from, what I'm saying, the near death experience. They've come back from the psychedelic experience with this profound beauty, this new, this kind of like they kind of know what they need to do to fulfill their destiny. The whole, time is short. God, hey, you need to. Are you going to do it or not? We've given you the tools. Now let's get with it, type
Right.
deal. So there's this passion you come out with to be gung ho and just grab the world, and do what you were sent here to do. Now that road can be, where that starts and how long that takes is something where you have that vision. Now that's the good thing about the NDE, the psychedelics or whatever. And so, but some people, if they don't have the pattern, the mold, they don't have the direction on what to do, and they return to their mundane jobs. Their boss is breathing down their neck. They need to perform faster. They got to meet quota. They get back into the hustle and bustle of capitalistic America, and it just sucks the life out of you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm only as good as what I can produce, and I'm only, I'm making minimum wage or whatever the case is, and I've seen eternity. I've seen God. I've seen angels. I hear their song. I see their colors. They communicate with me. But now I'm back here in this mundane. It can, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it can produce a depression within you. Like, man, I'm meant for so much more, but I'm spending 50 hours a week bagging groceries, and I'm supposed to
Right.
be painting. I'm supposed to be singing. I'm supposed to be doing a podcast. I'm supposed to be writing a book. I'm supposed to be sharing my story. If we don't do it, there's this weird depression that comes in. I think we're supposed to. I think that there's a place you can go where the depression and that fear of not fulfilling your destiny, you use that as fuel. You take that and say, okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know what happens if I don't do it. I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to go to the grave feeling unfulfilled. So there's this game plan that you have to kind of figure out of how to do it. How do I write a book? How do I book my first interview? Like, you know what I'm saying? You have this
Right.
vision of what you're supposed to do. Now, does that sound legit to you that it can
Oh yeah.
it can birth depression if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing?
Yep. Oh yeah. In fact, in the let's see, in the NDE community, that's really well known. In fact, I gave a talk at a national convention about that because so many people that have, whether it's an NDE or any other type of spiritual
Yeah.
experience, there is that really big risk of coming back and being horribly depressed. And I was for about 18 months
Yeah.
after mine. I was not only physically traumatized, and that actually I healed very quickly physically. It was like you said, for me, the being back here in this mundane reality, having to put food on the table, having to wash the clothes and do this and do that. What I ended up first for me, I went the route of realizing what it was that I came here to do, remembering that I had to let go. I was really angry at God for sending me back. I was so mad for so long, but I didn't know it. It was kind of at almost a subliminal level. I didn't realize I was carrying that anger, that why couldn't I just be dead? That's really what I wanted. When I finally let go, it was like this epiphany one day where I realized that was what was going on, because I had asked for help from God and my guides. What is going on? I don't feel very good. I feel depressed. And I had that knowing all of a sudden that I'm angry at being back here. Once I let go of that, then I was able to really get into the determination of, okay, now I know what I need to do. I use that prior depression to really fuel the work on my book.
Yeah.
And for me, I had to realize I couldn't do everything all at once. I had to take it one step at a time. So I did one little thing at a time and didn't set necessarily a time limit, like one must write the book within 6 months.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I did. I just knew I needed to take these baby steps and it would get done. So I started to take the baby steps. The second thing that I realized I had to do was to rely on other people. And it wasn't all about me. I didn't have to do everything by myself. I could rely on other people to help me, even if it was just to act as a sounding board. to someone I could go to and say, you know what, sometimes being here stinks, and
Mhm.
here's why. And yeah, sometimes you just need someone who can listen and hear you and just say, okay, I got it. But I also learned with writing a book anyway, that I had people I could rely on. I had a really good friend who I didn't even know that she edited books for part of the time. I mean, she was a technical writer at work. We often worked together. I had no idea on the side she had this entire other business of editing spiritual books for people. I had no clue until we talked about this after, I started writing my book. And so she was my book coach. If she wouldn't have been able to help me, if I didn't know about her and thought I would have had to have done everything by myself, I don't know that the book would have gotten written. So it's learning how you can, for me anyway, it was learning how I can pull in other people, to help me out, even if it was just a little bit. And really just chunking down the work, especially if you are working, a 50 or 60-hour
Yeah.
week, which is, you might have to make some pretty tough decisions. Like, do I need to switch jobs? Do I need to go part-time? I can't make those decisions for anybody,
Hmm.
but those are some tough decisions that people may need to look at. Do I really need to live in a 2,500 square foot house and pay for all
Yeah.
that stuff?
Yeah.
Can I downsize a little bit, which would then free up some more money so I wouldn't have to work 60 hours a week? I don't know what those decisions look like for people, but we can easily, as humans, get ourselves stuck in a job or in a lifestyle that really doesn't suit the
Yeah.
person who we really are, our inner truth. So the first thing is knowing what that truth is. Are you a musician? Are you an artist? You want to write a science fiction novel? If that's your truth, then begin to chunk away at ways that you can achieve that. Writing a book is achievable. I would have never thought I could write a book,
What about
but I did.
marketing a book? That's something too, right?
I
Once
got
you have it
help with
written,
that.
you know.
Yeah, I mean that's where PR people come in,
Yeah.
I realized I tried doing it on my own for a long time.
Yeah.
I stink at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's hard.
um, it is hard. For some people it's hard. For some people it's super easy. I work in business throughout my business career. Even in the government, there are PR people. There are people who do that for a living who are wonderful at it. So it helps just to hire them for a couple hours a week for help, even if it's just a consult. Um, I don't think in that way, and that's just, I'm a creator. I'm not a marketer. I'm
Yeah.
just, I just give it out.
That's good.
It's up to the people who help me to find the venues for what I do, my speaking venues or these venues.
Hmm.
But each person has gifts and abilities that they bring to this planet. And one of my friends is an incredible PR person. That's the gift of love and light that she brings to this planet. She does it exclusively for people who write and speak on spiritual topics. And that's her gift to this planet, is bringing those voices to the wider world. She doesn't have to necessarily create a painting. Her creation is bringing these
Bring
voices
it.
out to the
Yeah.
world.
That's good. Let me ask you this about this is a question we had in the chat, and if anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them, and I'll try to translate them across to my friend here. Sarah wants to know. I'm sure you've probably heard this too, especially being in that field and going to lectures where everybody has a different view of it or whatever the case is. And I've heard this too. Um, Going into the light can be a trick. Like don't like that's the trick to
Oh,
try to like, hey, come here. Like you're not supposed to do that is what some people have tried to promote and say almost like a doctrine. Hey, this is the trick. They trying to trap you or whatever. I don't. There's all kinds of weird stuff that goes along with it. But have you heard that going into the light was a trick? And what was? Did you go
Yeah.
into the light? I mean, how does that
Well, I
work?
just woke up in it, so I didn't have the
Yeah.
choice to make. But there are a couple of thoughts there. First of all, it isn't just the light, it's the love. You can feel that love. It isn't just this bright light. There's a love and a peace and a presence that goes with it. So it's all of that together. The other piece of that is the furthest back that I can trace that whole myth about the light trap. Goes to an episode of Star Trek, believe it or not. I can't trace that myth back any further. Maybe it does go back further than that, but it was an episode, I think, on Star Trek Voyager or something, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. So be cautious. All I can urge people to do is be cautious about stuff like that you hear, because you never know where those stories are coming from. Uh, if you need to trace it back, I mean, that's truly the furthest back that I can trace the myth of the soul trap of the light is an episode on Star Trek Voyager. So just be cautious about what you hear, and let me tell you that when you die, you'll know. There isn't a question. You'll feel the pull to the love, and that's what I would recommend, is just going with the love, that feeling of love and joy and peace, not necessarily what's going on out here in what's left of your human perception. Go into the heart, go into the love, go into, follow the love, follow the peace. That's the truth.
And that's something that you've brought with you to this side of eternity as well, right? You can kind of
Yeah.
discern the love, or this is tainted, this is got an ulterior motive by the what we would call discernment of spirits, if you will. You're able to discern the intentions. It's not just about what you hear or who's an elegant speaker or what looks like love. You're kind of able to kind of discern what it really is,
It.
you know what I'm saying, by the feeling and vibration of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting for me now to go to conferences, the spiritual
And
conferences,
also,
because I
yeah,
can pick out who's
people
really
making it up
truly
as they
living it.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, who's not. So be careful if you're ever around me, because I can tell if you're struggling with love or with what you're projecting. I mean, I can always tell when someone's faking their spirituality. It's so plain as day.
The
Um,
waters are muddy
yeah,
these days.
exactly. It might
Yeah.
be harder for other people to notice that, but
Yeah.
for anyone like us who has touched on that, and we still have the practice, the daily practice of working with that on a daily basis, I can tell immediately if the feeling. I can also feel if someone is intending to live in that love, but there's some cloud of discord around them that is kind of clogging it up. Um, but
Do you take on personal clients to help them with that, or is it something that you just kind of use through your art, through your book? I know you're helping people in that
right.
sense. Do you do one-on-one sessions or anything with people like that now that you're more connected?
Yeah. I don't, I had done some spiritual, what I called like spiritual, not really counseling, but just spiritual sessions with
Mm-hmm.
people. What I'm moving into, and that I'll be rolling out in the next month or so, is really some energy work around that. So instead of like verbally coaching people spiritually, instead what I'll be doing is offering energy sessions to kind of help clear that stuff out
Mm-hmm.
on a one-on-one basis. That to me feels more of my truth. I'm not a talker, really. I'm not a counselor. So getting into like spiritual coaching didn't feel quite right. But for me, helping move my energy and channeling maybe a higher energy through me. I've been working on my sister and some friends, and it's been working very well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll that out in the next month or so. So stay tuned
Awesome.
for more on that.
It's good stuff. Well, man, I know you go into a lot more detail in the book, and it's a beautiful story. And if people want to check it out, they can go to your website. Your main website is just nancyrynes.com, correct?
Correct. NANCYRYNES.
You can check out her beautiful art and her book. So you have two different books.
I do. The main book that details my experience is called Awakenings from the Light. And then I have a secondary book, which kind of contains a lot of little bits of wisdom that I, for one reason or another, didn't put in Awakenings. And that one's called Messages from Heaven. And those are things that I was told during my NDE, little bits of wisdom that people can use as a contemplative tool. I use it as like I read a passage and then just spend 10, 15 minutes contemplating it. So for me, it's more of a meditative tool.
Awesome. Yeah, you got a really beautiful website. Let me ask you this. How was this? Because I know you're talking about going to conferences and you're able to pick up on energies and being able to tell. And there's some characters out there, whether they're the speaker or whether they're helping with production. You've been on a lot of big television sets sharing your story. The Today Show, NBC, there's a whole bunch of them. But was you able to, have you felt that weird, I don't believe you feel? You can feel that stuff too, right? Even if they don't say anything, you're sharing your story. They're like, you know that they don't. It gets kind of weird once you're transitioning, and that could be overwhelming, right? You're telling someone your story, but you know what they're thinking. A lot of weird energy thing that you have to kind of learn how to discern. Was that a hard transition at all, being able to share your story in front of people? Because I know you're sensitive to energy and stuff.
Yeah, it was. It's not so much anymore, but it is true. I can feel it when someone's not, when they're like, I almost hear their thoughts.
Yeah.
I can't, but I can almost hear what's going on in their brains. But, like, for example, Megyn Kelly, whatever's gone on with her, whatever, she was totally into what I was talking about. She was in her heart. It was a heart to heart conversation. So there was nothing clouding that. However, some of her staff obviously were not very believing of me or Dr. Parnia or Cherie on the program. So I can feel that. The transition to that was hard because I was in that place of love and light, and I just want everybody to love me, right? But then it took me maybe a couple of years to understand and to learn how to just let that stuff roll off my back. It's still not always easy if there's a vicious personal attack, mostly because I don't want my family to be affected by all that. I mean, I can take it, but I don't want those people closest to me to be affected by it. Yeah. But I also understand, I think, more now that people are at different places, and people come here for different reasons, and some will never in this lifetime be in a place where they can embrace God or any kind of divinity. And that's okay. That may be why they came here, is to experience that. So it isn't, it's not up to me to judge any of that stuff. It's just up to me to learn how to be true in who I am and what I'm saying, and knowing that what I say is truth. I don't lie about what I experienced. If I don't know something, I don't invent anything. I just say, I have no idea. Like, someone once asked me who made God. I'm like, I don't know.
If you know everything, who made God?
Right. I don't know. Where did the Big Bang come from?
Yeah.
Ask a scientist. They'll invent some stuff, but they really don't know that answer either.
Yeah, I know. That's the ones you got to watch out for, the ones who know everything and they just make it up as they go. They have an answer for everything. It's kind of let me ask you this though. Has anything gotten weird for you yet, as far as like, because you're getting out there, you've been on a lot of big platforms, your name's getting out there. Has there been any, this kind of comes with the territory I've had to deal with it, stalkers? Has there been any people who were adamantly against you or trying to debunk your story personally? Have you ran into any of that yet?
A little bit. I mean, certainly not anybody physically stalking, nothing like that. But there are, the skeptical elements out there, the trolls too. I mean, there are people who will just say negative things just to be negative. But what I've done is I've realized that if what I say tweaks people that much, then I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
Instead of wanting, everybody to be love and light, which I do, I know that for some people to get to that love and light, I have to push their buttons, and I don't do it intentionally. But whatever I say may tweak something in them, and they react because there's a fear or there's some stuff going on in their minds about what happened in the past. If what I say tweaks them enough to have them react in anger, then that means I'm having some kind of an impact. I'm bringing something into their consciousness. They may not actually be able to deal with that for 5 or 10 years. I don't know, maybe never. But what I say makes some kind of an impact on someone, then I'm doing my job.
Mm-hmm.
That's how
Yeah.
I've come to look at it.
That's a good way
And
to look at it.
the trolls are trolls. There will always be trolls.
Yeah.
I just ignore it.
Yeah. They're definitely out there. And yeah. So again, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. So everybody, make sure y'all go to her website, nancyrynes.com, and watch the interview that she had with Megyn Kelly. It's a really professional piece that was done, and she got to share her story on that stage and many other platforms that you've been able to share your story on as well. It's good stuff. So nancyrynes.com. Nancy, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or maybe plug or anything before we get off of here?
I just want to wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful 2019. And remember always just to live the truth that you feel inside for yourself. I mean, that's the beautiful gift that each one of you are.
That gut feeling, everybody can tap into it. The God feeling.
Yeah. The God feeling, exactly.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. We'll have to do it again.
Thank you.
All right, God bless. Nancy Rynes, ladies and gentlemen. Beautiful story. And I know she had more to the story. You guys have to get the book to finish it, but she's got a lot of really cool stuff. And again, her interviews are really beautiful to listen to as well. Near death experiences, the NDE, the out of body experiences. It's kind of the weird bilocation or dual consciousness, to be conscious of your body and then conscious that you're out of your body at the same time. Very interesting concept. I think the Mary figure is very interesting as well. How God or the divine just kind of shows up in that personification that you can handle, that you need. There's been a lot of people who's talked about that. Jordan Maxwell has talked about it. A lot of philosophers who talk about these angelic entities or these ETs are able to show up in a form that won't scare you, something that you can handle. And if you could see them and the way they looked, it may freak you out. And seeing what reality really looks like and the beings that hold this stuff together, it's could be overwhelming. But it shows up in a way that we can perceive it and not get freaked out and try to apply the principles to our lives. It's really good stuff. So with that being said, I hope you guys everyone had a Merry Christmas. Hope you guys have an amazing New Year. That stuff you've been planning on doing it, now is a good time to start. You've been planning on starting something. You have a passion. You have something that you're wanting to see come to pass, come into fruition, whatever it is. Like I said, you want to do a podcast, you want to do music, whatever it is that you want to do it. Go ahead and start today. Plant something, put something in the ground. Or you already put something in the ground, water it, cultivate the land a little bit. Do something today that you want to manifest for tomorrow. If you don't put nothing in the ground, nothing's going to manifest for you. Shout out to my good friend John Santiago, who's in the chat listening. I only listen to a few podcasts, and the one of the ones I listened to was the John Santiago Raw. So I got his this shirt here, And it's probably backward on the screen if you're looking at it, but it's a beautiful shirt. Make sure you guys check out his podcast as well. Type in John Santiago Raw, and you'll be able to check that out. So I listen to his podcast. I listen to Michael Basham. I listen to Adam Starseed Bay, all people that I affiliate with. And I listen to Christy Lee's podcast. I'm actually on that one every Wednesday night. So, yeah, man, beautiful stuff moving forward. You got to do something. Don't get discouraged, man. Don't get depressed. It can, when things aren't happening fast enough, you got to do something. I'm approaching, or if not at 200 episodes, and the first ones were done years ago, 2012. It took me a long time to get there, and a long time to find consistency with it, right? To keep it going. But when you have that vision, man, write it down, make it plain. That's what I'm doing. I got my vision board. I got what I want to happen. 2019 is going to be beautiful. Use today. Use these next few days, these next few weeks, reflecting. Get a vision of what you want to come to pass in 2019. Learn from your mistakes. What didn't work? What blew up in your face? What do you want to do better? What are you doing that's working? Find out something that is working. Okay, when I do this, people pay attention. When I do this, I see results. Stick with that. Consistency. Don't have all of these different ideas and just attacking them all, because you're just going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Find something that you do really good. Find something that makes your heart race when you do it. Find something that you love to create and bring it into fruition. 2019, man, the ball is in your court. Man, beyond your wildest dreams, there's this whatever you want to create. I'm stepping into some new things. My guided meditations are, man, so beautiful. I'm just honored to be a part of that, of bringing that out, of channeling that information, of hearing the Father's heart and putting codes and modalities within that, and people having encounter through those meditations. It's beautiful. That's just the beginning. I have a lot more in plan for those. If you guys want to check that out, go to my website, TruthSeekah.com. Those meditations are available, and there's going to be a lot more coming out. Excited. And a new album is out January the 1st. I got a new 7-song EP that just came out. Most likely going to be doing one right after it as well. So there's going to be a follow-up that's already started on. So that's coming. A lot of cool stuff, man. 2019, the ball is in your court. Much love to everybody who has been supporting and who's continued to support. You guys rock. It's good stuff. One thing I wanted to kind of talk about is kind of something interesting that I watched. And I wanted to be careful on promoting this just because it's very deep. But there's a show on Netflix. It's the show Black Mirror, where they just put out a episode that you get to pick the choices throughout the show. You get to pick what music they listen to. You get to pick what cereal the guy eats, and it's a movie, and you select as you go through it, and you get to pick the choices. It's really good. It's really deep. It can mess with your head if you're if you have I don't want to say it, but I have a lot of people who have hit me up over the years who I think it would mess with them, right? Maybe that's the best television. Maybe that's the best movie. It's the one that makes you think, the one that makes you go within and question your life. Like we were just talking about last night, which I've talked about on here before, the show Haunting at Hill House, which is something that it's about death. I mean, and I couldn't help but thinking about death and reliving it. And it's a kind of a grim view of it for the most part. It's a very sad story, but it makes you go within. It makes you question your path or your trajectory. What are you doing? Are you wasting time? Those type of things. And so that's the best art. I mean, even I guess what I bring to the table with my music is to help you get a view of eternity, to have a view of the angelic, of the sixth sense, tapping into your ESP and talking about angelic encounters and supernatural abilities and all of that kind of stuff within my music. And it and that kind of stuff sparks something within people and takes them on this journey, right? And so that's the best kind of art. Even like Nancy was talking about her art. She's even using like minerals and things that you'll be able to feel the vibration in her paintings, bringing it to life, and it just being a mirror into eternity. I don't have it with me right now, but my good friend from Seeing Beyond the Veil Art just sent me another piece, and it's this beautiful picture that she did for me, which is a bunch of sacred geometry, and it's beautiful. I posted it on my Instagram and Facebook and stuff, so if y'all want to check it out, go look at that. But it's having art that is like a portal to the divine, right? Like you're looking at something and it reminds you, these sacred geometry symbols, like those are things that they exist as portals. Music, stories, books. I got this beautiful book here from my guest I had on a couple of weeks ago. Chantel Renee sent me her book, Aligning with the Divine. Great episode, great book. It's these things that you create. Like, how long does it take to create something like that, right? It's a dedication. You have to have consistency. You have to show up. You have to be present. Whatever rituals you have, whatever if you want something, you got to spend time with it. You got to believe in it. You got to believe in yourself. If you leave it up to other people, I don't know, that's not really good. But you have to find you a team. You have to find you people who are good at what you suck at. Or some about writing a book. Everyone can write a book. Yeah, but not everybody can market a book. Find you someone who can book you interviews, get you on podcasts, get you out there in front of other people. You know what I'm saying? And so I love doing other shows. I love being interviewed. I love talking about spirituality in my path and things like that. I go into, you'll go on other shows and they'll be able to tap in and ask you questions that you don't think of. You know what I'm saying? People have genuine questions, and I love doing that. I maybe even tap into some things on other people's shows that I wouldn't normally talk about on my podcast. Finding those things in those areas that you thrive, something I love to do. Do more of that. Do more of the stuff that you love to do. And especially if it's things that bring joy, peace, understanding, harmony, faith in God. If you're doing that stuff and you can do it for a living, what's stopping you? 2019 is here. Embrace it. It's all on you. I'm excited for this year so much, man. Just ended 2018 with a bang. It was a beautiful year. We got a lot accomplished. I can look back over my music, my episodes of the podcast, and I've talked to some beautiful souls. I've created some beautiful things that will hopefully outlive me, right? You know what I'm saying? It's something that you've created that didn't exist until you breathe the breath of life into it. Good stuff. 2019 is here. Let's do it. I plan on doing some live events. Hopefully, I've even been toying with the idea of putting together a conference here in my home state, Mobile, Alabama. Putting together my own conference, getting some people down here to speak, and doing that. So yeah, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure I have your email address on the website. Go there and sign up for my email list so that you're up to date with everything that we're doing. If you would like to book me on your podcast, I'd love to come on and be a guest, whoever you are, no matter how big or how small it is. I'd love to come out there and do some stuff with you. So make sure you send me an email if you want to do that. And 2019 is here. Again, thank you guys for the support, the Patreon, all the music is there. Cool stuff. A bunch of new stuff coming. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. I'm booked up on these podcasts until the end of February almost. So we're making moves, making strides. Love y'all. We'll do it again. Peace and shalom.
Your way so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.